Nick Greif is a VP of Go-to-Market Strategy and Communications at InStride. Nick really knows his stuff. He specializes in developing initiatives that drive organizational growth, social responsibility, and bottom-line results. He talks to us about the intersection of leadership and education and helps us to consider innovative ways to improve organizational cultures and enhance diversity in organizations. Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah OH. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Nick, I'm really excited to chat with you today and explore that intersection of leadership and education and communication. And before we do that, can you give us some background? Maybe what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to, and really appreciate you having me on today, Doctor. So my journey has mostly been about following interesting leadership opportunities. You could say that curiosity has been woven the whole way through. So I began my career in management consulting because I knew that that would expose me to a lot of different projects and challenges and helping me build a wide foundation of knowledge. And then from there, I moved over into public policy, which had long been a passion of mine. So I became an economic advisor to the mayor of Los Angeles, and then later spent time as a policy director and finally the chief of staff, for a city legislator. And working with elected leaders in particular was definitely a crash course in both leadership and communication. So after about 8 years in government, I then stepped back into the private sector to seek new challenges and ended up in social impact technology. And so currently that's where I work. I work at a company called InStride. We're a social impact ed tech startup, education technology, that is changing how employees upskill and attain education by getting their employers to offer tuition-free education to their staff.
Yeah, really, really cool, Nick. And I love what really stuck with me was that curiosity-driven career, because
Yeah.
then you're engaged, you're having fun, you're learning. And I think that helps to guard us against so many of, not feeling motivated, not feeling driven, not knowing what's next. But by kind of tugging on that curiosity thread, you've had an incredible career and so much to go yet. So you've kind of hinted on your organization. So you're with InStride and it's really innovative. So instead of, and this is my take, so let me know if I'm not quite hitting the nail on the head. So instead of that traditional tuition benefit that many don't take advantage of, your organization offers these professional customized development programs for employees. So a two-parter, can it talk to us about this and why this approach over the traditional model?
Yeah, you've got 100% right. So traditional tuition reimbursement, which for those that aren't familiar, is where you as an employee are offered this benefit from your company, and they're essentially going to repay you for some or all of the tuition you spend on your education. But it's on you to go figure out where you want to study, what you want to study, how to find the cash to pay up front, and then get the right grades you need to then submit for a reimbursement, which could take 6 to 9 to 12 months after you initially spend that money. And so the main problems with that model and what we're trying to fix, in addition to the fact that only 1% to 2% of employees end up using that benefit in a given year, is that it puts up a lot of walls, a lot of barriers to, frankly, the exact employees that really could use this benefit and make the most out of it. In particular, the fact that you've got to shell out thousands of dollars for your tuition ahead of time means that you're already locking out everybody who doesn't have thousands of dollars in their pocket that they can spend and wait 6 months to get back. You're also telling people who have had either what we call educational trauma, had a tough experience with the education world. You're saying, hey, you've got to go and figure this all out. Maybe the complexity of the system did make you feel very good last time, and now we're saying again, if you want to use this benefit, you've got to go figure it out. You got to figure out all the applications. You got to figure out the forms. You got to decide what you want to take. So we take all that and we say, okay, if we were to redesign this from bottom to top, how would we make this as accessible and open to employees as possible to get that education? So we do a few things. One, we work with education providers ranging from skills providers like Simply Learn, high school diploma providers like Career Online High School, all the way to doctorate degrees, masters, bachelors,
Mm-hmm.
places like Arizona State University. And we create a direct bill model where the employer, the company, pays directly to the academic provider. The
Mm-hmm.
employee never has to pay any of that money out of pocket. The second thing we do is we put all those options together into a marketplace. It's got up to 3,000 plus options for the employee to really look into, and it's all in one place, easy for them to figure out. Okay, I'm looking for XYZ learning opportunity, and you could filter by all those things. There's even a pathfinder that will ask you questions. What are you looking for in your education journey, and spit out the types of programs that align with your interests. And then the final thing we do is we have academic coaches who will reach out to and talk to registered participants, employees at these companies, and understand their needs and help them understand their benefit. And so they've got someone holding their hand the whole way. In cases is a daunting experience, which I know attaining education is for many.
Yeah, I just so much of what you said really resonated because I think like my educator heart is just so excited right now because what you're saying, I experienced that with the traditional model with students saying, I don't know what to do here. I don't have the time with this. And even when I was doing my master's, I was working full time, but I just got my foot in industry. And I actually had asked my brother to pay for my class up front because of that tuition benefit. It didn't come in till after I submitted the grade. So again, all of this to streamline it and to remove those barriers. And two, I'm thinking you said only 1% to 2% of employees typically take that traditional route.
Yep, that's correct. And
Wow.
we have, with our corporate partners, we've seen participation rates up to 30% in a given
Yeah.
year because of how, easy you make that on ramp. And at the end of the day, it's really a question of the companies. Do you want people to use this benefit? Because frankly,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, we look at the benefit suites that we see when we go to our HR benefits page. Some of those things are there because employees want them, and some of them are just there because it feels like they should be, and no one actually really wants you to use it because it costs the company money. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us, a lot of our conversations with corporations is about how this is a strategic benefit. This is not just, look, obviously I'd love all day just to be here to get companies to pay for free education
Mm-hmm.
for their employees.
Yep.
Like my social impact, public policies,
Yes.
mind and background is all for that. But, obviously that's not going to get a company
Mm-hmm.
to say yes. And it's really about,
Mm-hmm.
look, this is better for your company. You're going to retain more of your employees. You're going to be able to hire
Mm-hmm.
better caliber of employees. You're going to get a
Mm-hmm.
more engaged workforce. And so all of that, comes to make it a really a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, and exactly. And if you're seeing up to 30% engagement, if you're thinking a department of 10, if three of them are in there and learning, we recognize it's probably going to start rubbing off on others. And if we're thinking of that return on investment, if we have people retooling and continuing to engage in this, then the quality of what we're doing is better. So, yeah, I think so. Win, win, win. I'm biased, I'm an educator, but still, it's really hard to see a downside here. And another thing I found that your organization's doing, I really feel strongly about this too, is STARS or skilled worker or skilled through alternative routes. And you talk about how hard it can be to get hired without a bachelor's. And that's just the truth right now. It might
Mm-hmm.
change, but that's where we are. And so this program, it helps to enrich people who are interested in developing more skills. So when I was thinking about this, I was wondering, and this is probably a question that you and your team get, but when we take individuals who go through a program like STARS, how are they enriching workplaces, organizations in a way that maybe our traditional, that bachelor's to industry, that route, maybe that those new hires might not necessarily be able to do?
Yeah, look, all the research shows that diverse workplaces create better outcomes, create more profit for companies, because diversity of experience is diversity of thought, right? And you're going to get different perspectives that are going to help you catch, pitfalls you would have otherwise not noticed. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we see on the, kind of the skills-based hiring front, and we're a big proponent, of doing this. We actually work with, sort of our corporate partners to help them translate what is currently bachelor's degree required to the actual relevant skills that are needed. So, an example of that is we've worked with Medtronic, a major medical device organization, with 60 of their different job families, looking at skills taxonomies, doing the external and internal research and stakeholder interviews to figure out, okay, what actually do you need to do these roles successfully? And then taking that one line that says bachelor degree required and actually breaking it out into its component skills. What that allows you to do is open up your hiring pool. You're going to have more people eligible for those roles, which when it's a tight labor market, as it has been the last few years, it's really valuable. But it's also going to mean that you can, bring in individuals that maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to join your organization because they're locked out because of that bachelor's degree requirement. And unfortunately, through, the way that our country and its social fabric or, and the struggles that we've had with that often means that underrepresented groups, low income individuals, tend to have a lower rate of, bachelor degree attainment. And so you're essentially locking out your organization from a lot of its DEI goals. But the key here is that, we see this sometimes where companies have DEI goals and they tend to try to accomplish them, or they don't try to, but what ends up happening is they make progress on them, but often at the entry level. And then as you go further up the organization looks less and less diverse. So it's critical here is that at InStride, we're not saying bachelor's degrees aren't valuable. They're incredibly valuable. They're as valuable as they've ever been, if not more so. All the research shows that you're going to get a much greater career progression, more take-home pay over time, if you have that degree. But should that be the barrier to get in the door, or should you be able to have relevant skills that you could have gotten all sorts of different ways to get in the door, and then internally that company invests in you, helps you get your bachelor's degree, helps you get the education you need to continue to move up that career ladder. And now what you've done is you actually created a workforce that has diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and is going to be able to then also be a really strong future-proofed talent pipeline that you can mature and grow internally.
Yeah, and there's so many. I'm thinking about a culture of an organization like that is one I want to be a part of, one that recognizes, strength isn't just tied to this very traditional and limiting route, one that prizes and supports professional development and diversity in different ways. And another thing I like that you brought up in that answer is kind of unpacking that bachelor degree requirement. So I think that's something we use these HR templates that have already been through legal and we don't think about it again. We've been doing this for decades, right? So just taking a minute to step back and say, well, what really goes into this? What is it that we're expecting as part of this? And a lot of times, like critical thought, right? Reasoning, the ability to play nicely in the sandbox with others. Those are things, like you're saying, that we can demonstrate in other ways. So really, really powerful work. So my next question, and we've kind of hinted on this, but I'm thinking about kind of the questions you get about return on investment or those tangible outcomes. So I bet employers, you get them, and maybe potential vendors, collaborators that you're working with. So how do you respond to those questions about, essentially from the organizational standpoint, what's in it for me?
Yeah, definitely. We're a social impact company, and the companies we work with often, we're aligned on mission, but nobody's a charity here, right? At the end of the day, it's like if you're not going to find a way to make your investment in any HR benefit worth your while as a company, you're not going to do it. And so for us, it's critical that companies understand how this investment is financially beneficial to them, because otherwise they won't do it. And then we're not going to be able to accomplish that goal of getting that tuition-free education provided to individuals, across the country and the world. And so there's kind of a few main components that, through our research and our work with, corporate partners, we've seen really significant returns on investment. The first and sort of largest is around retention. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but retaining your employees is incredibly valuable. Turnover is so costly. The cost to hire, the cost to train, the cost of not having someone in that role during that interim period is really substantial. Way more than what it costs to provide somebody education, And so what we see is that participants in our education programs at the corporate partners we work with retain at a 90+% level versus an average of 62%. Wow. So you're seeing a 3x reduction in attrition. So right there, you're basically paying for your program just on your retention benefits alone. But more importantly, an organization with low turnover is an organization with a lot of institutional knowledge. You've got the ability to have people that stay inside the company that know the business, who then can grow and promote into greater roles. And having education and training along the way enables those individuals to get those skills to be eligible for those promotions. And so what we also see is program participants are promoted at 2.5 to 3.5x the rate of non-participants. The other thing that we see that's been really exciting in a few of our corporate partners where we are able to get some demographic data is that individuals from underrepresented backgrounds tend to participate in these programs at often double their rate proportional to the population within the company. And so what you're seeing there is that individuals who didn't really have access to the traditional formal education system, often probably due to cost and the fact that tuition costs have increased double inflation for the last 40 years. Now, it wasn't because they didn't want to go to school. It's because there were barriers in the way. So you drop those barriers and they're going to participate and thus be able to, be promoted and work up the career ladder. And then the final, kind of big three that we like to talk about is just, future-proofing your workforce. And so we've got, everyone, of course, going to talk about technological innovation and AI and how that's changing the nature of work and changing the roles that, that will need to exist in the future. All of that just still boils down to if you don't have broad sets of skills, if you don't have the opportunity to reskill or upskill in a way that keeps your talent knowledge relevant, it's going to make it really hard for you to continue to work in certain segments of the workforce. But for companies, that's an existential threat, right? And so helping your employees manage that transition isn't just for them; it's also for you as the business. And so those are the kind of main three areas that we see really significant ROI that usually leads to, I think it's about 226%, return on investment. So essentially you're getting $3 back for every dollar you put in.
Wow, that's incredible, right? And if we're thinking about managing an organization and large organizations, if we're going back to a device manufacturer, if you tell me I can up my retention for employees that they're more likely to get promoted, we have diversity in thinking, there's DEI, and also future proofing. And like, well, so what's the catch, right? And I'm not asking you to tell me I don't think there's a catch. Again, I am fully behind all of this, but it just, it makes sense for the social good. And if that is not, like you said, we're not running nonprofits here, but at the same time, you have such concrete positive outcomes. It's really hard to see a drawback to this.
Yeah, and that's why we see with, I think, at least half of our corporate partners, within that first year that we've launched a program, half of those partners then expand the program. And we've had zero attrition in terms of corporate partners that have launched a program. So we've never had a corporate partner that launched a program and later said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I think that shows you that, once someone's bought in and says, yes, I think this makes sense. I think there's a return here. But then you get to actually proof it in the pudding, right? They launch that program and then they all say, yep, this was worth it. And many of them say, it was worth it. How do we go further? How do we increase the tuition cover? How do we enable a employee to gift this benefit to a dependent, right? There's all these different ways that you can expand the program. Yeah.
Very cool. And listeners, 100% of maintaining these partnerships is literally unheard of. So well done. You're doing it right. So my follow-up question, again, I'm an educator, I'm a leadership communication scholar. So for me, this link between learning and leading, these are so tightly wound, right? We can't untangle them. So again, in my mind, at least, we can't have one without the other. But can you talk to me about how your organization, I bet you have some great conversations about this connection between learning, professional development, and leadership?
Yeah. First, 100% agree with you. We talk about lifelong learning at InStride all the time. We don't just offer the programs we offer to corporate partners that we work with. We also offer it internally. So we have our own program called Step Forward. We cover 100% of tuition at over, I think it's 3,000 different learning options, all the way up to doctor's degrees, for all of our employees. And that's because we believe wholeheartedly in lifelong learning and the value of education. And in particular around leadership, frankly, if you're not a curious person and you're not interested in continued learning, I don't believe you can be a really strong leader. I don't. And I haven't seen it, right? Listening and curiosity are key elements of successful leadership. A leader isn't the person who walks in the room and says, here's what we do. A leader is the person who walks in the room and says, what's the problem? What are you seeing? Tell me your thoughts. And they sit back and they wait. And when everyone's had their chance to talk, and importantly, usually you make sure that the three people in the room who didn't talk, you ask, hey, what, Jan, what was your thought? And pull out the introverts as well. Then you've got all the information to make a reasonable, reasonable decision and take a leadership action. That's critical. And curiosity about your employees, curiosity about their experience is also, a huge part of leadership. As leaders tend, of course, to skew a little older for obvious reasons, right? You don't get into a leadership position usually at the first stage of your career. But if you're not thinking about and learning and reading about what's happening for the experiences of the generations below you who have come after you, then you're not going to understand them. And so that's all part of, a culture of lifelong learning. And internally at InStride, to go back to your question more directly, we do career boot camps, within our company. We do career Ask Me Anythings with our executives, where it's just an intimate group. We usually cap it at like 20 participants, so that it can be a really authentic, honest conversation, and it's literally an Ask Me Anything, whatever you want to talk about it, from a career point of view. And so we definitely believe that accessibility, that openness, and talking about the hard topics is also critical.
Yeah, and so important, right? So even if you have this formal leadership role, if we're not continuing to learn, kind of going back to what you said, we're not future proofing ourselves, right? This idea of being open and flexible and recognizing we've never arrived because it's always ongoing. That if we're not doing those things, then that tenure is going to be short-lived and likely pretty rocky as well. So, Nick, another thing I was thinking about and getting ready to chat with you today, and this is something I really love about what I get to do, are the success stories. So I bet you hear some neat ones, maybe individuals, and it might even be from folks in your organization, outside the organization, or maybe from employers. So I'm wondering if you have one or two of these that really stand out to you.
I do, and it's actually really one of the best parts of the job and working here at InStride. So we actually do this series of learner videos that we put together, and we first release them internally, at our all company meetings, and then we release them externally, and it just helps remind us as well as the people we talk to externally how important our mission is. Working in a corporate role, sometimes you lose sight of the day-to-day impact you're having on an individual's life. You're thinking about strategy, you're working on an op-ed or a press release, and whatever it is that you're doing your day to day, and you forget sometimes that you're having these big programs that are growing and having impact, but at the end of the day, it's an individual life that's being changed by tuition-free education, and that's having ripple effects in their personal life, their family's life, and their community. And so, I can send you some of these links to these learner videos that you can put in your show notes later.
I would love
but
it.
one of the videos that I really enjoyed that I saw recently was about a woman named Ashley who took advantage of LabCorp's Advantage education program offered through InStride. So she's a mother of two and was feeling fairly stagnant in her career until LabCorp offered their education program that meant that she could, of course, pursue her education for free. So she enrolled in a IT-focused program and graduated, I believe, this past May. And a few months later, she was promoted to be an IT business analyst, at LabCorp. And so what that story tells me is it's really impact on both sides. So for her, of course, she's growing her career, increased take-home pay, helpful for her family and her feeling of self-worth and what her career goals are. But for LabCorp, IT roles are in hot demand. They are hard to fill. It is a very challenging, place to hire in. And so through this program, whatever that cost of that IT, certificate or degree that she enrolled in, they didn't have to hire a new person to do that. They were able to upskill someone internally. That person already knew the business, already had gone through all the trainings and the procedures and HR and all that stuff, immediately could transition and start day one, essentially having impact. And so you're seeing that where that win-win comes in internally. The other quick example I give you is for an organization called Intermountain Health. And so Intermountain is a health system in what I've learned recently is called the Intermountain West, which apparently are the states to the west of the West Coast states, but east of the Midwest. So all those states
Okay,
in the,
I've learned
and that's,
something new.
I didn't know that there was another
Yeah.
phrase for what was between the Midwest and the West Coast, but I always wondered
Hmm.
because there is
Yeah.
quite a few really lovely states there that, so apparently it's the Intermountain West. So anyway, they're a major health provider there. And they have just incredible results with their program. And in particular, at this time we've got a national nursing shortage, and you've probably
Hmm.
read about or heard about, how
Yeah.
traveling nurses can make just incredibly high salaries. So as you can
Hmm.
imagine, the ability to do the mission. And I guess I said earlier, we're not all charities here, but technically the health
Hmm.
systems actually are. They are nonprofits.
Yeah.
Um, and so, for them, 100% of their registered nurses that have enrolled
Hmm.
in bachelor's of science in nursing degrees, 100% have been retained since the start of the program. Whether they've
Wow.
finished the program, they're still in the program. And so when you think about the value of having trained nurses at your health system to be able to deliver healthcare to people who need it and accomplish your mission as a health system, I mean, it's
Hmm.
just staggering. But that's what happens when you invest in your people. They invest back.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's just so powerful because I think the now antiquated but pretty traditional view is organizations can be like, why am I going to do this for my employees, right? Like it is, I'm not a charity, but recognizing that if we just take one step back, a little bit more macro approach, and recognizing we're retaining these relationships they have, we're retaining the organizational knowledge, right? And we're able to, as you're saying, upskill them at the same point, then as that is what's in it for you, organization. So yeah, really, really phenomenal how it's so mutually beneficial there. So Nick, I have two final questions for you. They're related, and this is a way we always end on the communicative leader, because I think that there are so many folks who want to make their work life what they want it to be. And with leadership advice and communication, these are things we don't need to spend years necessarily working on. We can make small changes that will lead to big differences. And it's clear you're immersed in this field, leadership, you're in communications, this framing, these talking points probably fall to you and your team. So I'm wondering, considering all of your wealth of experience, what are some recommendations you have for our titled leaders out there, managers, directors, maybe at the C-suite? What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, there's kind of, I'll give you a big three sort of leadership and management mantras that I try to live by.
Hmm.
One is, create psychological safety. The other is make it clear what the commander's intent is. And the third is foster autonomy and ownership in your people. So to break each of those down, psychological safety, hopefully your listeners have heard about,
Hmm.
but if they haven't, it's really just about making sure that people feel comfortable in your organization, sharing their ideas, pointing out problems, and having respectful disagreements. We all know and have worked for or seen leaders that are sort of command and control, do it how I say, individuals, or try to shift blame to others, to shift it away from themselves. That is incredibly short-sighted and leads to an
Hmm.
organization that is brittle and is unlikely to succeed. And the reason for that is I think quite obvious, which is that if people won't speak up, you're never going to get their best ideas. You're
Hmm.
not tapping into and maximizing their potential. You're actually minimizing their potential, because all they're going to do is paint within the lines you give them. But your
Yeah.
lines and what you think the right lines aren't always true. And they're often limited by your own personal experiences. Each of us is just a vessel for what we've gotten so far in our X number of years on this earth. And the idea that you wouldn't want to maximize that by adding the years of experience of all the people on your team, by making it psychologically safe for them to share and speak up, is a shame in
Hmm.
my mind. So empower people to feel psychologically safe, and the way to do that, of course, is not to shame people, not to shift blame to your team. Like, as a leader, it's your job to fall on the grenade, and it's your job to
Yeah.
provide praise and pass on the great works that your team does. At the end of the day, even if you want to be totally selfish about it, that's going to get you promoted far faster.
Hmm.
I hear that this one always, this is a slight digression, but my philosophy has always been like, I want to make myself replaceable and also know who my replacement is. Because the only way you're moving up the career ladder
Yep.
is if you've got somebody ready to take your shoes. Because if you've made
Mm-hmm.
yourself indispensable in your role and you've pushed down, or worse, denigrated those people in the eyes of upper
Mm-hmm.
management, then they're not going to feel comfortable moving you from that spot. You want them to move
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yep.
So that's one, psychological safety. Commander's
Mm-hmm.
intent, another one. It's originally a military concept, but has absolutely migrated over in the private sector, as it should. And that's the idea that your people should understand not just what you want them to do, but why you want them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because at the end of the day, in a battle, right, on the military
Yep.
side, a plan's only as good as the first shot that's fired. And this is true in the corporate world too. So if people understand what the goal is, then when they actually go out in the world to do it, they don't have to come back to you every time there's a slight change to say, hey, what
Mm-hmm.
about, do I need to do it this way, or what do I do next? Which of course, as a manager, would suck up all your time, and
Mm-hmm.
micromanagers have this problem. You want people to know, okay, I know where the goal is, and I can make my own decisions on how to get there, while checking back
Mm-hmm.
occasionally to make sure that they're not, off the reservation. And the third is related to that, which is autonomy and ownership. People on your team are going to hit, whatever their equivalent of 110% is, if you've
Mm-hmm.
given them some amount of autonomy and ownership, pride in their work. Make sure that they know, hey, you own this project.
Mm-hmm.
The buck may stop with me, but at the end of the day, like, this is your area, and when you do well and when this area does well, I'm going to make sure people know that it was about you. So for me personally, I make this clear. I manage two teams at InStride, one around revenue operations, which includes, responding to requests for proposal, and then others around communications. And so, with my team members on both sides, I make it very clear to them that, I've got limited attention span. I get pulled in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things. Like, I need them to really own their areas of operation. And it's your job to make sure that RFP is going to be really strong. I'm going to come
Yep.
back. I'm going to review it. I'm going to be your support, and I'm here to bounce
Mm-hmm.
ideas off of. But you're the one who has to figure out how to make this
Mm-hmm.
happen. Same on the communication side. And that allows those individuals to rise to their best
Mm-hmm.
level. And it also frees you up as a manager to do the things that, frankly, you're being paid to do, which is to think
Mm-hmm.
strategically, to take time to work cross functionally, not just manage the things that are that your team has been set up to do. So long answer to your question, but hopefully helpful.
No, a really, really thoughtful response. I love too. I mean, these all tie together so nicely, right? I think if we're thinking about this, giving authority and ownership, I think so many employees really just want to be seen and valued for what they were hired to do. And when you're giving them that opportunity, then that should be tied into that psychological safety as well, and recognizing that I have a place here. I am valued here, right? People are going to look to
Yeah,
me for these things. And two, with the intent, it's one thing to know what we're doing now, but having that deeper level understanding, like you said, when something changes, when we need to shift a little, when someone needs a decision in a meeting and you aren't physically there, then your employee's able, with some, relative degree of confidence, to be able to make that decision.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing I'd say is it all ties back to learning as well, right? If you
Mhm.
have a good employee, you don't want them to leave. And the
Mhm.
way that they're not going to leave is if they continue to learn and grow. And so that autonomy and ownership allows them to stretch their wings and allows them to learn new things.
Mhm.
You're there to help guide them and make sure they don't, they don't fly too close to the sun, right? But, at the end of the day, that's how they learn. And their learning is going to benefit you, but also keep them interested and keep them around, and not have them say, okay, I'm stunted here, and I'm going to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So all things that I mean, that's going to be helpful. These tips helpful no matter what. And so I'm wondering now, my follow up to that is, now we're thinking about employees, all ranks, all industries. So maybe we don't have that formal title, and maybe we don't want that formal title. But regardless, what advice do you want to leave those friends with?
Yeah, it's easily my favorite question. And simply stay curious,
Hmm.
make sure you're always learning. And the one that I think prompts the most introspection when I say it is, don't get too comfortable. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is, there are a lot of people I see that get stagnant in their career because they get into a role that they're good at and they do a good
Hmm.
job, and they get comfortable once they understand all the facets of the job. They know how to execute it day in, day out. They can do, they can do a passable job. People, they get praise, they get, that 3% annual raise. But if you're too comfortable and you aren't stretching into new roles, you're not stretching into new projects, occasionally changing companies, if you're not finding ways to do new things, you're not learning anymore. And if you're not learning anymore, you're not going to advance in your career, because the folks that decide promotions, that see value, they see the people that go above and beyond. And I don't mean that in terms of amount of hours worked, right? This isn't about work 100 hours a week. That actually is often not correlated, if not negatively correlated to a promotion. It's about the people that look around and ask curious questions and say, why does this work that way? And should it? And the thing that often happens is you see people that ask that question, they take step 1, they don't take step 2, which is to go learn the answer. And then they don't take step 3, which is to say, hey, I have some ideas about how we could change that. Even if it's not in your lane, it might be someone else's lane. And that's okay, as long as you do go through the right channels, you work with that person, and then you guys together can go up to management and say, hey, we had this idea. We think this could work. And, 2 times out of 3, management may say, we already thought about it. We don't want to do it. But 1 time out of 3, it's going to be important. It's going to make a difference. And you got to learn on all 3 of those. And the 1 out of 3 that actually makes a real difference highlights your value to management in a way that, makes you much more likely to move upwards in your career.
Yeah, it's so thoughtful too. And there's this whole line of literature out there that when we're engaged, when we're curious, that spills over into home life, right? So whether it is the version of us that comes home to dinner and that has energy to hang out with the family or the kids, or to, engage in rec and ed sports, or the one who's not, stagnant at work and kind of brings that at home because things just aren't quite as exciting as they once were. So that curiosity is a great way to keep kind of plugged in there. Nick, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say one last thing. I find that it's a manager's job. It's your manager's job to find interesting things for you to do. And maybe that's only 20% of your job. But the thing that I've always told my bosses is, if I get bored, I will tell you. But if I'm still bored 6 months after I tell you, I won't be here anymore. Yep. And I think that's a mantra that any employee should feel comfortable having that conversation with their boss. And that's going to highlight to them, one, that they have to keep them interested by giving them assignments. It's not about saying, hey, entertain me with toys. It's like, hey, entertain me with interesting work. Which sometimes means you're taking on a little bit more work. But it also highlights to your direct report, to your manager, that, I'm hungry. I want to do new things. I want to grow. That is helpful because that'll keep them focused on you and your development.
Yeah, I really love that. And that's something I'm going to think about when I'm coaching my students who are near graduation. Because I think that as an employee coming in to saying, I'm going to let you know, and then I'm going to give it 6 months. But I think that demonstrates so much to the manager about what a prized employee they have there, who is communicative and, wants to be engaged and really clear about what boundaries might be, because it's not going to be the right environment for them. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick. This was really a fun conversation. I love this intersection of leading and education. I've learned so much, and thank you to the work that you do with your team, with your organization, and within communities.
Hey, it's my absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you having me on here to talk about my leadership journey and the work that we're doing here at InStride.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.